John Carpenter will always be one of my favorite directors. While he's covered every genre from action to thriller to sci-fi, he thrives in horror. After 2 decades and 15 films, some of which frequently are listed as some of the best films ever made, he began working on what many consider to be the last great John Carpenter film, In the Mouth of Madness. Not saying his other films after this one are bad, but they don't stand anywhere near the quality of films like Escape from New York and They Live. A lot of studio politics are responsible for his desire to get out of Hollywood, but that's another video altogether. The movie's the third part of John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, which started with The Thing and continued with Prince of Darkness. Each film revolved around an end-of-days scenario. The movie was written by Michael DeLuca and was inspired heavily by the works of H.P. Lovecraft. The title's intentionally similar to Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. Lovecraft's work is frequently known for plots that have to do with insanity, so that played a huge part in this. The film also incorporated other Lovecraftian references, like The Old Ones, and they even used some direct quotes from some of his work. DeLuca wrote the script in the 80s and offered it to John Carpenter, who initially passed on it, but changed his mind a few years later. While initially skeptical, Carpenter was drawn in by the story, and in 1993, production began. Before I get into the behind-the-scenes stuff, let me talk about the film itself. The movie confused a lot of people because it was frequently switching back and forth between what was real and what was fiction. John Carpenter spent months cutting and recutting the film to get it right. So, what's really going on? The film was about the war between fiction and reality. Creatures that had long since been banished to the other world have found a way to break into ours. The movie gives a lot of hints that become clearer in a second viewing. Sutter Kane's a fairly well-known horror author that writes very popular mainstream horror novels. With each book, his popularity grows. Why is this? Kane in and of himself was no one special. However, he began to hear voices, the voices of the old ones, who were telling him what to write. So why would the old ones tell him to write trashy mainstream-style novels? The old ones wanted their influence to have as wide a reach as possible. What better way than writing material that would appeal to the largest audience?
Kane is a billion-dollar franchise. He's a tentpole to this company. We've already sold the film rights to his new book, as well as publication rights in 18 languages.
The old ones gained strength in their followers. More and more people became obsessed with Kane's works, and the old ones grew stronger. With every book, the old ones infused a little more of their madness.
Sporadic riots continue to hit eastern cities, and reports of violence from Boston and Philadelphia are now coming in.
So the fans would be ravenous for the last book, In the Mouth of Madness.
The newest and presumably posthumous work of Sutter Kane continues to sit at #1 on the bestseller list. In the Mouth of Madness is expected to break all previous publishing records.
With this power, they gain the ability to alter reality. Everyone who reads Kane's books is corrupted by them, and eventually turns into a monster.
Have you heard the rumors that Kane's books have affected certain readers?
As the old one's power grew, it corrupted the children of Hobbs End, who then passed it off to their parents.
Been messing with the church. Now something came leaking out, took the little ones first and passed it on to us.
Throughout the film, you see the kids chasing the dog, and it has 4 legs. Later on, the kids' faces are bloody, and the dog only has 3 legs, implying that the kids ate one of the dog's legs. The old ones needed a vessel, a way for them to pass from their world into ours. Along comes Trent, the determined insurance fraud investigator. He wasn't going to stop until he proved the whole Sutter Kane disappearance was a scam. Only it wasn't a scam, and in the end, Trent discovers the ultimate truth, that he's nothing but a character who was written by Kane.
You are what I write. Like this town. It wasn't here before I wrote it. And neither were you.
The town of Hobbs End didn't exist. Kane wrote it into existence with the book. Trent was reading the books within the book and used the hints left on the covers to find its location. The church in Hobbs End was the bridge between fiction and reality.
The thing I can't remember is what came first, us or the book.
We are bubbling in a Sutter Kane story. This is not reality.
Reality is not what it used to be.
His sole purpose was for him to bring the manuscript into the real world, which would start the apocalypse. He had to believe that he was real in order for it to work.
This is a rotten way to end it.
This is not the ending. You haven't read it yet.
Only a few people read the first few chapters of the manuscript. Kane's agent and Julie. The agent saw what Kane was trying to do and attempted to kill Trent to prevent the apocalypse.
Do you read Sutter Kane?
Julie was a tool used by Kane, and once she managed to get Trent to Hobbs End, he wrote her out of the book.
Why wouldn't I remember her?
Well, that's easy. She was written out.
The kid in the bookstore tells Trent that he can see him,
He sees you.
meaning that Kane is watching him. The bartender tells him he has no control because it's how he was written.
I have to. He wrote me this way.
At one point, Julie even tries to convince Trent that they're in the book.
But regardless of what you saw, regardless of what you think, we are not living inside a Sutter Kane story.
That's how I know what we're seeing is real. We didn't stage any of this. It's all happening for real, Trent. And it is all in that book, and that's how I know.
When Trent runs into the tunnel, that's the mouth of madness that's taking him back to the real world. As Kane's influence grows, you see more and more blue. Blue shirts, blue houses, and blue eyes. This, of course, leads to Kane revealing himself as God.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm God now, you understand?
The parallels between fiction and reality began to present themselves. Trent's in cell number 9 in the asylum.
Put him in number 9.
And in room number 9 in Pickman's Inn. The book covers all showcase things happening in the movie. Haunts Are Out of Time shows the old ones telling Kane what to write. The Hobbs End Horror shows the church and the creature that Mrs. Pickman turned into. The breathing tunnel was the tunnel that Trent was running through to get back to his reality. The feeding shows the children chasing the dog, and the tagline, "There's something very wrong with the children in this town." The thing in the basement shows Mrs. Pickman hacking up her husband in the basement. Trent even calls out this part of the book.
Mrs. Pickman in the book is a lunatic who chops her husband into coleslaw.
And in The Mouth of Madness, which shows Trent running away from the monsters in Hobbs End. Throughout the film, we see Trent picking at a poster of Hobbs End. When he finally peels it away, it's to show the In the Mouth of Madness poster, meaning that Kane managed to create a rip in the fabric of reality and let the old one slip through. Trent sees the madness spreading like wildfire and tries to stop it, but gets put in the asylum. Finally, after Armageddon strikes, he escapes and watches the movie version of his story. That's when he realizes that he truly was just a character in a book. In the beginning, Julie even completely foreshadows the end.
A reality is just what we tell each other it is. Sane and insane could easily switch places if the insane were to become the majority. You would find yourself locked in a padded cell, wondering what happened to the world.
No, it wouldn't happen to me.
Well, it would if you realized everything you ever knew was gone. I'd be pretty lonely being the last one left.
The movie was shot in Toronto, Canada in 36 days for about $10 million. The opening was shot in one day in a printing factory in Toronto, Canada. John Carpenter and Jim Lang collaborated to make the awesome score. This time it was more rock than his usual synth. Carpenter worked with Sam Neill in 1992's Memoirs of an Invisible Man. He liked him so much, he thought he'd be the perfect actor to play John Trent. Neil loves the film, and it's one of his all-time favorite movies that he's worked on. Classic actor Charlton Heston played Jackson Harglow. In between shots, he told the cast and crew stories of making movies in the old days. Considering he'd been making movies since the 1940s, everyone was interested to hear his old war stories. The character of Sutter Kane was played by Jürgen Prochnow. Kane was a reference to Stephen King, who was also a writer who placed many stories within New England. Sutter Kane also has the same amount of syllables as Stephen King. The movie also takes a little jab at King's works.
Sutter Kane happens to be this century's most widely read author. You can forget about Stephen King. Kane outsells them all.
That's a young Hayden Christensen as the paperboy. The hospital in the beginning was a water reclamation plant on Lake Ontario. The asylum part was a soundstage. In the scene where the window shatters behind Neil, his neck was cut for real by the breakaway glass. As a way to save money, they shot many of the scenes in various locations in Toronto, rather than building sets, such as the restaurant and the office. The alley scene was another. They shot that in a real alley in Toronto over the course of one evening. Another way to save money was by doing lo-fi practical effects. Like when the lights kept going in and out, they just used a dimmer switch. The church they used was a real Greek Orthodox church. People thought it was a matte painting, but it really is just sitting out in the middle of nowhere. The car was filmed on a soundstage with a black cloth behind it to simulate night. John Carpenter loves Robot Monster. It was a movie that he used to watch all the time as a kid, so he had it playing on the TV in the background. For the effects, they mostly had K&B effects. They did the creatures, the contacts, and the rest of the practicals. For For the optical effects, like the car riding on the clouds, John Carpenter hired his friends at ILM. The scene where Julie opens the door and it's a normal room, and then reopens it to see Kane's lair, was a bit of visual trickery. The room was set up like normal, but when she closed the door, the crew quickly redressed the room. The dog was supposed to walk off to the left, but it kept messing up, and they had to reshoot the scene 14 times before they finally got it right. The walls were fiberglass and plastic, painted to have this weird living texture about them. When Julie reads the manuscript, there was a hole in the table. They shined a light up at her, and fans blew her hair. Julie eats the keys, but they were prop keys made out of pasta. When Julie gets out of the car, it was really a contortionist, wearing a Julie mask upside down. For the monster sequence with Miss Pickman, originally they had a rubber suit for her. John Carpenter didn't like the way it looked, so instead, they did the scene with a miniature puppet. When Julie was transforming, they ran rubber whips under the door to simulate tentacles. Pickman's Hotel was an homage to Pickman's Model by Lovecraft. Many of the Sutter Kane books were nods to Lovecraft. The Thing in the Basement, The Thing on the Doorstep, The Whisperer of the Dark, The Whisperer in Darkness, Haunter Out of Time, both The Haunter of the Dark and The Shadow Out of Time. Production designer Jeff Ginn designed the amazing book covers for the film. Some of the quotes from the film were from Lovecraft's writings. At one point, Trent's reading a Kane book, but the lines are actually from The Haunter of the Dark. Julie gives a speech that takes a lot from The Rats on the Walls. Hobbs End was a reference to the location in the film Quatermass in the Pit, known as 5 million years to Earth in the US. The tunnel was a forced perspective. It only went back about 50 feet or so, but was painted to look like it went on forever. ILM did the Terran reality effect. The paper was made from tinfoil. The door was made from rubber and was pushed from the other side to look like there were demons trying to break it down. The Wall of Monsters was about 20 or 30 people in costume. They changed the ending of the film to save money. Originally the world was supposed to be sucked into the book. It would have cost too much, so they changed it. Like the two other films in the Apocalypse trilogy, In the Mouth of Madness did poorly at the box office. The movie's become a major love it or hate it film. The folks that love it for its unconventional storytelling and its nods to Lovecraft. The folks who hated it, it's too easy to say they didn't understand it, but I tend to think that a lot of them just didn't understand it. It's not really a cut and dry A plus B equals C movie. It's the kind of film that benefits from multiple viewings. I know some folks dislike that because they think everything should be explained in one sitting. Well, with this, it is. It's just clearer after the second time you see it. It's really sad when movies like this get overlooked because it seems to prove that audiences really want something more akin to Kane's earlier novels. Actually, if Kane was real, I'm sure Armageddon would have already happened.
Look, I'm sorry about the balls. It was a lucky shot, that's all.
Hey everyone, I just want to remind you, I have a Patreon set up. If you like the show and would like to help keep me going, even $1 a month would make a difference. I would really appreciate it. I've got some cool rewards set up, so check it out. Thanks a lot.